Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. All right, so it's already begun. We talked about it all season, all off-season at least, that the Browns were going to have to bring in probably 2 starters in free agency or with trades at the offensive line position, given that, they're set to potentially have to get rid of the entire offensive line from last year. The only question mark being Joe Bitonio at left guard, where if Joe returns, Joe is going to be the left guard and he's going to start. Every other starting position is up for grabs. Left tackle, up for grabs. Right tackle, up for grabs. Right guard, up for grabs. Center, up for grabs. So that being the scene, we knew that the Browns were going to make a move, right? Whether it be in free agency or in trades. Well, they made a move, and they made a move in a trade today. They've traded with the Houston Texans, and they got Titus Howard for a 5th-round pick. Now, this is more than just a 5th-round pick. They traded the 5th-round pick to get Titus Howard, and then they negotiated a new contract. It comes in at about $22 million APY, which was the max I think I would have been willing to pay a Rashad Walker, right, to play left tackle for you. The question is, what tackle position does Titus Howard play for this team? Because you have to imagine he's going to play tackle. Now, to Titus's credit, he's a consummate professional. He dealt with a lot of bullshit out there in Houston the last couple of years, was kind of thrown around the offensive line, not meant to play his strengths. And it was kind of like devious that they did this during like a contract year for him or close to a contract year for him. But he has had to play right guard, right tackle, left tackle. He's played every position on the offensive line except for center. So he could play left tackle for this team. That could be where they envision him. His numbers as far as like his starts at left tackle seem to be pretty equal to his starts at right tackle. So he does seem like he is not the number of starts, but the quality of starts seem to be equal to when you look at pressure rate and all of that. It doesn't seem like he's drastically worse at one side or the other, as far as like my first kind of look into him as a player. So I'd imagine $22 million, he's definitely playing tackle. Which side he's more comfortable with, right or left? Well, that I think goes into why Titus Howard was such an attractive get for the Cleveland Browns, because he has that flexibility, right? You know that Titus is going to start somewhere on that offensive line, which means when you get into the draft, you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into what side of the offensive line does one of these prospects play at. You can just pick whatever offensive line prospect that you think is the best. I think this trade right here probably sets the table the best for the Browns to take an offensive lineman first in the draft, whether they trade back from 6 or whether they sit at 6. I think this sets the table for the Browns to be able to trade, to be able to draft their offensive lineman first. Because let's say you want Mao Noah, and you want Mao Noah to play tackle. Now, I think he played on the right side at Miami. So then you could just have Titus play on the left side, because Titus has done that before. Put Mauno on the right side where he's more comfortable with, and you can roll that way. If you draft Monroe Freeland, who's played on the left side in college, well, you could put Monroe on the left side. You could kick Titus over to the right side. Ain't going to be no problem. You see what I mean? Right? Like, you don't have to fixate on, Spencer Fano, he played this side, and then Caleb Lomu, he played this side. You can just pick whatever side, whatever player you like, and then be able to flip Titus Howard to whatever side you need. Because, again, 4-position player on the offensive line. From what I hear, look, and I'm not going to act like I've done deep Titus Howard research. I've looked at some games. I've tried to become more informed since the trade came down this morning. But from what it looks like, he seems like a much better bet at tackle, albeit at 29 years old, than Rashad Walker, who's 26. He seems like a much better pass protector, especially. I think that's where people seem to think that Titus Howard shines. And this is a peak Andrew Berry type move, right? He has a move like this almost every offseason where he turns a late day 3 asset into a starter with the combination of being able to throw some money at the issue. And, and look, this is the Andrew Berry kind of philosophy here at work. This is what Andrew kind of does to find value in positions where value is not really common, right? We saw this exact same thing happen with wide receiver, another position that gets paid egregious amounts of money on the open market, right? Remember when Jerry Jeudy was traded for and signed for about $15 million, that's when wide receivers like Jerry Jeudy were somehow getting like $25, $30 million. It's ridiculous amounts of money. I mean, Calvin Ridley got like 30 or some shit like that. So having this strategy does pay out when trying to get value out of those super expensive positions. We're seeing tackles go for ridiculous amounts of money. Rashad Walker, who's I think, average to slightly below average left tackle in the NFL, but starting quality, sure. He's going to probably go for about 25, 26 million. He's 26 years old and he's not terrible. So he's probably going to go 25, 26 million. This way, the Browns undercut that, get somebody who's, I think, above average at $22 million a year. Not as young as I thought they would want to go, right? 29 years old. So, the Browns are hoping to be good in 2027 and 2028. So the window has to kind of open up much quicker than I think some people anticipated, myself included, if this is the kind of move you're going to make. But it's only a 3-year deal, so it's not going to really hamstring you. And it's not that much money in the grand scheme of things, especially with the salary cap rising 8% consistently every year. I mean, $22 million is going to be a drop in the bucket when it comes to the end of this deal. And the way that the Browns are probably structuring it, probably going to scale for the percentage of the cap that it's going to take up. So all of that means that like the money on this side is pretty solid. Like getting this done for the amount of money that they got it done for, I think is a pretty solid deal. A 5th round pick, I think is we'd be really happy if the Browns used a 5th round pick and got a starting tackle for 3 years, right? If the Browns just drafted somebody who could start at tackle for 3 years in the 5th round, we'd be pretty happy with that, right? That is the hope with Titus Howard, is that we got somebody who could start at tackle. He's versatile, has played all 4 positions in the NFL along the offensive line, and this solves one of your big issues with the tackle position. So now one starting offensive line position is off the board. Joe Bitonio is still a question mark. We don't know if Joe's going to come back, but the longer this thing drags out with Joe Bitonio, the more likely it is that Joe comes back. And even with left guard, I think the Browns have some in-house options that can be pretty useful, right? We talked about it in my mock draft video, which unfortunately this Titus Howard trade kind of blows up a little bit, but not entirely. But in my mock draft video I dropped earlier today, we talked about, hey, KT Levingston could be a legitimate option there at left guard for the Browns. I think there was a lot to like about what he did last year that could translate to maybe kicking inside the guard. You got Zach Zinter on the roster. You might as well give him an opportunity, right? And this draft has a ton of guards that you can go after. So getting a tackle off the board there, opening it up so you can go right or left tackle early in the draft, and then boom, you got your tackle position settled. Because all of a sudden, you go from DeJuan Jones and a bunch of question marks to Titus Howard, DeJuan Jones, and possibly a early draft pick at the position. And if those are your 3 tackles, I feel pretty good about that, right? If DeJuan Jones is your swing tackle, all of a sudden we go from a dog dookie, excuse my language, but a dog tackle room to a legitimately deep tackle room where it's like, hey, we got 2 guys we feel comfortable with starting, and then we have a 3rd guy in that rotation that if he has to step up and play either the right or left side, we feel like he could be serviceable. I think that's a much better situation at tackle than where they are. If the Browns decide that they really want to give DeJuan Jones another rock and put him at right tackle and then have Titus Howard play at left tackle, I think that, I would like a little bit more depth, given that we've seen DeJuan Jones miss a lot of games over the last couple of years. But if that's how they want to play it, that's at least a acceptable starting tackle situation. Now, I don't think it would be preferable, but it's at least acceptable. There's a lot of different ways it could shake out, but I like that they address tackle. I like that they got themselves a tackle who can play on both sides of the offensive line. And not just both sides of the offensive line. He's a four-way guy, right? Right guard, left tackle, right tackle. He's done it all in the NFL against NFL teams. So that, I think, is a enormous positive for this move. The money, I think the money's solid, right? $22 million for a starting tackle is about what you could hope. I think he's a better player than Dan Moore, who got 20. I think he's a better player than Rashad Walker, who's going to get 26. So 22 for him over 3, and then you consider the cap's going to raise by 8% over the next 3, well, not over the next 3 years, 8% each year over the next 3 years. So a 32% increase from where it is now. And we're talking about $22 million having a salary cap impact that's extremely minimal to the Browns salary cap situation. So even if it doesn't work out, the money isn't something that can hurt you. The draft asset that you gave up was a 5th round pick that I believe you got from Oakland. I think this was the Oakland. No, my bad. I'm an old man. The Las Vegas 5th round pick that you got for the Kenny Pickett trade. So you turned, so you somehow turned the Zadarius Smith trade, which you turned into Kenny Pickett, and then Kenny Pickett, which you turned into another 5th round pick, and you turned into Titus Howard. This is the latest line in that exchange. They brought in Titus in here. I'll play this clip that Jonathan Jones had about this trade, and then we'll wrap up here.
So the why of this for the Cleveland Browns is rather obvious. They had to rework their offensive line. And when you are the Cleveland Browns, you don't have that much cap space, right? We've been talking about that for so long. You also, as the Cleveland Browns, you're not really a garden spot. You're not a destination. So how many free agents, once we get to unrestricted free agency next week, are going to choose the Cleveland Browns to go to? That is why they needed to trade, and they needed to find a trade partner who had an offensive lineman that maybe they wanted to get out from under with the contract. Well, enter the Houston Texans. So for a 5th round pick for a new contract, because you don't want Titus Howard to just be a 1-year rental, you pay him a little more money. This is likely just a 2-year deal with a we'll see for the 2028 season. Meanwhile, the Houston Texans have been in a longer than year process of remaking their entire offensive line in front of CJ Stroud. So expect them both in free agency and the draft to continue that journey away now from Titus Howard, who heads to Cleveland.
The Browns said they were willing to spend some money in free agency. And this is them spending some money, not necessarily in free agency, but this is essentially a free agency deal. So Browns spending a little money. They got tackle out the way. And this is a classic move for Andrew Berry in terms of he never likes to go into the draft pigeonholed into what he has to do in the draft, especially with his first picks. If you look at his overall draft philosophy, when he can avoid going into the draft with a gaping need, he will try to plug it, right? The Browns had a gaping need at tackle. Nobody on this roster could potentially start at left tackle. Now, he plugs that hole. Part of the reason I think Andrew Berry likes to do this is, 1, he loves to maintain flexibility, and 2, he loves to use that flexibility as leverage when he's trading. Because if you look at Andrew Berry's trade history, right, for the most part, he has done a good job of using leverage to his advantage to extract more than what you would think you could get out of certain assets or certain players. So I think this is kind of Andrew doing a double move. 1, trying to take care of a tackle need, and 2, trying to make sure that he's not entering the draft and having negotiations at 6, feeling like he needs to take a tackle there because he is pigeonholed into doing that. This kind of frees him up to do more of what he wants, or to be able to sell more of what he wants. And if he wants to trade back from 6, he has to sell people on the idea that he might take Caleb Downs at 6, that he might take Arvell Reese at 6, that he might take Sonny Styles at 6, right? They have to credibly believe that he is a threat to take it. if they want to be able to extract what they need to. So I think this is multiple layers at play here for Andrew Berry, if you're familiar with his work. But I like this trade. I like the contract. I like the player. I think this is a pretty solid move for the Cleveland Browns. We'll see what they do going forward at left tackle, how this affects the draft. We'll have plenty of conversations. Hell, I might drop another mock draft this week. Maybe. But that's my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think about it down in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.